You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello and welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Nathan Whittacre, CEO of Stimulus Technologies, and we're very excited to come to you for our 100th episode. Seems like yesterday we started this podcast and now we're celebrating our 100th episode. And we thought it would be wonderful to bring back a guest that we had on early in our podcast and invited my friend Adam Witty back. So welcome, Adam.
Nathan, what an honor. The big 100. Thank you.
Excited to have you here. And those that don't know Adam, I'll read a quick bio here so we can get familiar with him. So Adam is the founder and CEO of Advantage Media, which is now Advantage, the authority company, which is why we brought you on, is to talk about authority. And he's been a pioneer in authority marketing for many years. He started the company in 2005 in a spare bedroom with a clear mission: publishing a book done for you process for busy business leaders, which most of us listening here are very busy in our lives. And I had the pleasure of writing my book with Advantage, and it was a great process. And so really appreciate Adam and his whole team and the whole process that he created. And I'm sure that over the last few years, publishing books has changed quite a bit. And the question that I had, kind of coming into this and why we brought Adam back is, as business leaders, as business owners, and as businesses in general, how do we stand out in the age of AI? There's so much content being created and so many things. And we talk about on this podcast creating content and using AI to help us, but how do we stand out beyond that? And I think that's what, the biggest, focus of your company is. And, maybe Adam, could you, in the last 2.5, 3 years since you've been on, kind of talk to us about the changes in your industry. What's happened in authority marketing over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Nathan, again, to have the pleasure to be with you and your listeners. It's a great honor. I will also say that I started my career helping entrepreneurs, CEOs, and leaders write and publish a book, and then help them use that book as a marketing tool to grow their business. And probably a decade ago, we really transitioned to this idea of authority marketing and really building thought leadership. When we asked our CEO authors what was it that they were really wanting to accomplish, it wasn't writing and publishing a book so they could become a New York Times bestselling author. It was being the authority in their field, being the thought leader in their industry that people would turn to for insights and advice. And so we recognized some 10 years ago that what our customers really wanted was authority, and the book was the vessel to help them build and achieve that. So as you mentioned, yeah, I guess I am the authority on authority. It's something that I have spent a lot of time doing. I'm well past the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell famously talks about. So authority in an AI world. Man, oh man, a lot has changed and a lot will continue to change. But here's what I do know. I know that authenticity is still important and powerful. And as AI makes it easier for people to create content, what that means is there will be more. And with more, there will be more, forgive my language, more crap, more junk out there that's being flooded. And so authenticity matters more than ever. And I believe that arrow is only going up. And so when it comes to building authority, when it comes to being intentional about the expertise that you bring to the world, doing it in an authentic way where the reader, the viewer, the listener can see and hear you as a person and truly understand your voice is becoming more and more important, probably by the second.
I completely agree with that. It's interesting going through the process after, I worked with you guys and published my book. One of the things as I was speaking to different CEO groups and different people, want to give them information, but the comment I often got back was, we want to hear stories. We want to hear about your experiences about this, not just regurgitating information, which is what it seems like AI often does is, produce, information, but it's not authentic. So how do you help CEOs do that? What's the process of being authentic versus just regurgitating information that anybody can do, even AI?
Yeah, well, I would say first it starts with intent, right? So your intent has got to be to educate and to teach, not to sell, right? And that's where authenticity is, right? If all you're doing is sharing information for the sole purpose of this is how I make more money by selling more of my widgets, it's very easy for people to see through that, which is a lack of authenticity, right? The book that I authored in 2023, which is titled The Authority Advantage, the headline on the back cover of the book says, are you a thought leader with something to teach or an operator with something to sell? And I think many have approached what I'll call content marketing with, oh, this is a great way for me to sell more of my stuff, right? So really it's advertising disguised as content, right? Whereas building authority and managing and maintaining authority is having a true spirit and heart to teach people to make better decisions in their life and in their business. And in doing that, the positive ramifications will trickle down, which is you will be seen as the trusted source. And so if you have and operate a business that can help people in these areas, most likely they're going to come to you and say, hey, Nathan, I listened to your podcast. Hey, Nathan, I read your book. Hey, Nathan, I saw you speak at this conference, and I'd like to talk about how stimulus could maybe help my company.
I guess in your experience as you're working with authors and speakers and these thought leaders, have you seen more and more of them come to you with potentially AI generated or AI augmented content, or is it is there this desire of default to the easy button of letting ChatGPT or Grok just write the content for you? How are you balancing that? I mean, I can see that being a problem for you guys.
There is a universal desire amongst all humankind to seek and acquire an easy button. And, when it comes to creating content of any kind, whether it's a blog post or whether it's writing a book, seemingly AI appears to be this great easy button. And let me just say, AI to help craft a blog post is a far shorter putt, to use an analogy of golf, than it is to write a 50,000 word book. Because the one thing in a book is the attention span for engagement is far wider than for a blog post. And the way that you keep someone's attention is not through black and white facts. It's through story, and it's through emotive engagement with the reader, right? And that's where the art form of book writing really takes shape. And yes, can AI help make a book better? Yeah, it can. Do I think in what I think is based on what I've seen, do I think AI can write a compelling, engaging book? The answer is no. And while the machines are very good and getting better by the day, they don't have hearts. And because of that, their ability to emotionally engage the reader in the content is quite limited. I can't say that won't be solved, but I can only tell you what I see based on today. Now, are people still using AI as the easy button to try to write a book? The answer is yes. And any trained eye, candidly, any untrained eye can still spot it, Nathan, a mile away. And so we have seen a lot of manuscripts submitted to us that are generated by AI, and they're not very good. And they require a significant rewrite. What we've seen even more is the author will write the book. They will then upload it to an LLM, ask the LLM to critique it.
Mm.
And then they'll send the critique to us and say, what do you think of the critique? Now, I think it's kind of funny that they're then asking a human to critique the
Yeah.
the job of what they put all their trust in, which was the LLM. But yeah, it's having a profound effect on the book writing industry. Now, do I think that it will fundamentally disrupt book publishing? I think it will change it, yes, but I don't think it will disrupt it, because this art of long form content that is engaging for a reader to stick with, that's something where human writers have a real leg up and advantage on AI. Again, will that last? I don't know. I'm not a futurist. Yeah, AI use is rampant in the book writing field right now.
I'm just going to air a complaint for a minute. I love using M dashes in my writing, and I have forever. And now I'm like, can't use it because that's a trigger, So when I see excessive M dashes in writing, I'm like, well, that's probably AI. But I look back at old stuff, from 10 years ago that I'd write, I'm using M dashes. I'm like, man, this got to figure out a different way to punctuate or
Yeah, yeah,
different.
yeah. That's the telltale giveaway, right?
Yeah. Too much bolding, too many M dashes, lists,
Uh-huh.
things, but it's too much of it, right? All things that we used to use when writing, it seems excessive. So, well, I guess, with so much content out there, are you finding it a bit of a struggle to get a book that people want to read? Once they open the cover, and start reading it and it's engaging, then it becomes interesting. But how do you get people wanting to read some content, whether it's a blog post or a long form book,
Yeah.
when AI is producing so much material? I just decide, I have a friend of mine that just talked about, he wrote a book and self-published this year, with completely written by AI, and I'm sure that there's tons and tons of that available on book sites now. So how do you break through that noise, though? Do you even get somebody to even be interested in looking at the book?
Yeah, well, I would say a couple things. One, I have always believed less is more. And I believe in a world of AI, which is going to over index on more, 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 because it's the easy button, right? So as soon as there's an easy button, people are going to take it to an extreme. I do believe that the printed word continues to be less is more. Now, to your point, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a lot of people who never would have written a book before, but now that they were able to have AI do the hard work, which they were unwilling to do, which was to write a 50,000 word manuscript, and now they're going to print it. Will that add a lot of noise to the marketplace? Yeah, of course it is. But I actually think that it creates an opportunity. I think it creates an opportunity for people to stand out more significantly than even before, because there is now so much noise courtesy of AI. So, number one, I think less is more. Number two, I think the printed word becomes more important, not less important. When you hand that book to someone, what they pick up, what they read matters, right? I've always said, you hand somebody a copy of your book, and it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to raise your credibility in their mind, or it's going to decrease your credibility in their mind. And you open up an AI written book, and it's only a couple of pages in, and immediately your credibility is going to go down. And I don't think people are thinking about that. I don't think they're not thinking through the long-term consequences of pushing the easy button, right? I mean, to use an analogy here, Nathan, right? The easy button in weight loss is GLP, right? GLP-1s, it's the easy button, right? Everybody that struggled with their weight is now not. However, the long-term side effect that nobody's talking about is a loss of muscle mass, right? So it's creating a loss of muscle mass and bone density, right? So it's an easy button today, but the consequences long term are really not so great. I think it's very much the same with using AI as your easy button. Yeah, it allows you to create content, it allows you to create a book really quickly, but the quality of that is not so good. And that has a real downstream effect on the perceived authority that you hold in the eyes of the people that are going to be your future customers.
So if you do have a manuscript and you have spent time in the thought leader realm of writing your ideas down, coming up with, your opinions and your stories and your background, can you use AI to, you know, in any way and still maintain that authority without breaking it?
Yeah, so I think the best way to use AI is obviously in a walled garden, to use that analogy, which is AI is only utilizing your content. It's not utilizing content outside of that walled garden. And that would be another thing. A lot of these people that are generating and writing their book using AI, it's not in a walled garden. So they're taking other people's intellectual property and they're claiming it as their own, which, we have a word for that, and that's called plagiarism. If you have all of your content in a walled garden and then use the LLM to help you create outputs based on a framework, number one, it can do a very effective job of that. Number two, it's very sanitary. And again, going back to how do you truly engage someone in an authentic way? Well, story and emotion. And AI is not doing a really good job of that. So to me, AI in a walled garden is a wonderful way to frame and kind of put drywall on the framing. But then it has to be sanded, it has to be primed, it has to be painted. And I think that is really where the human is very, very necessary to create a durable piece of work that net effect grows your credibility over time.
We've gone through that with our clients creating, custom GPTs
Mhm.
with, you create your content, you load it with your background. For example, I put my manuscript in there and this is my, said this is my voice. And then, you can use it to create, blog articles or different things. But I do agree with you too, is you have to make sure you edit it and make it real and add your own flavor and stories. So, having that custom GPT helps a lot, but it's still not perfect for sure.
No, and most people push the button and they immediately copy and paste what was output and then they send it. Like they don't even read it. I mean, this is how careless and lazy AI is making some people, right? And those are the real credibility destroyers.
'Cause it gets things wrong at times, pulls in wrong information. I mean, humans get things wrong too, and we just kind of, I think, make this assumption that computers are perfect. But there's, it's only AI is only as good as the information it's ingested in the past, and there's a lot of bad information out there available that's just not true.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say too is authority by association, I think matters more today than it did even 2 years ago, right? In a world of AI, to be sourced in AI search results, you have to be seen not just as an authority, but an authority that has been recognized by other credible people or brands, right? So where your content is showing up matters, right? 3 or 4 years ago, I would tell you that having an authority brand or a personal brand website was really important. AdamWitty.com, right? It still is important. However, everything that I post at AdamWitty.com is seen by an AI search engine as far less credible than something that appears on Forbes.com or Entrepreneur.com or even in your industry publication, right? I always say people don't believe what you say about yourself, but they sure believe what other people say about you. AI is the same way. And so your content, your thought leadership appearing in other validated third party places is what's going to drive your authority score and drive your reference score by LLMs much higher than you simply just creating more and more content that you're solely distributing yourself.
Really interesting. I mean, that's SEO online has been talking about that for a long time. It's, those good references. How do you do that as a if we have an entrepreneur or CEO that's on this and wants to build some authority, whether it's for their company or their personal brand? How do you do that? How do you get published in an Inc. or Forbes or Entrepreneur Magazine or something like that? Even if it's a blog post, what's kind of the process of going through that? Seems like a very high bar to me.
Yeah, well, listen, it is. It isn't easy. And, I would start with what you and I are doing right now as a great example, right? So this is your 100th episode. You have a following, you have lots of listeners, and you have a track record. And here I am, the lucky guy that was invited on to be your guest. So I've got now your platform as a place that is allowing me to share my message with the world. And the third party validation of this isn't me tooting my own horn. This is somebody else saying, hey, here's a guy that knows a lot about this topic that we're going to bring on as a guest. So something as simple as, being a guest on podcasts matters. Having a public relations strategy matters. For many, many years recently, people thought, oh, I don't really need public relations, right? I'm going to just put all my time and energy into social media. Well, if working with a publicist can get you sourced as a reference in Forbes, on Entrepreneur, in your industry publication, and you show up there, you now have that third party validation that really boosts your standing in the eyes of the LLM. So public relations is having its new moment in the sun.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting. So, you talked about podcasting, you talked about, trying to get, in the PR side of things, hiring a publicist. If a CEO wanted to go down this direction and gain authority, what's something that they should be working on today to start? Because writing a book, I think most people that are in business have this dream of writing a book. It seems overwhelming. I know that it was an idea that you sparked in my mind 5 years before I sat down and did it. What's something that is a step in that direction the CEO can take this quarter?
Begin with the end in mind and start here. What do you want to be known for? What is the word or phrase that you as a leader want to own? And the reason answering that question is so important, because number one, it defines what are you going to share with the world? What is the expertise that you're going to share with the world? And then it also helps define who is the audience that we're trying to reach. And what is painfully surprising to me is how many people go out and start spending time and energy and money, creating content, publishing content, without having a central focus and a central idea of who their, ICP is, right? Who's your ideal client profile? In this case, it's really who's the ideal person that you want interested in what you have to say. Who do you want to influence as a result of it? So begin with the end in mind, which is what's the word or phrase I want to own? What do I want to share with them? And who is that ICP? And then start working backwards. That then helps you determine, okay, well, what platforms make the most sense for me? Based on your ICP, should you write and publish a book? Should you create and host your own blog? Should you put time, money, and energy into public relations? Should you instead try to bill yourself and get speaking opportunities and engagements? And some may say, well, I want to do all of that. Yeah, but we have finite resources. So if you know the message and the word or phrase you want to own and the audience that you want to own it in the minds of, then that helps you very pragmatically put together that priority list of what you would do first.
It's interesting, as you were talking about that, you said begin with the end in mind, and immediately Stephen Covey came up, because he coined that phrase. When we think about, Stephen Covey, we think about the begin with the end in mind. When you think about the people that are experts in this that have done really well, there's short little phrases, the Simon Sinek. If I say that, start with why. If you think about Dave Ramsey, or if you think about debt, you immediately relate Dave Ramsey. And so the biggest experts in those areas have clear relation with their word or phrase that matches them. So that's a great recommendation, because it's there's so much in our society that we associate with people, that they have the authority on.
Yeah, and then you have to say, is it a word or phrase that I could realistically kind of own, right? If you say, hey, look, the word or phrase I want to own is AI, it's pretty tough,
Yeah.
right? Vern Harnish, one of our authors and one of our board members, he's been at it for some time, but scaling up was the word or phrase that he wanted to own. And it helped that he wrote a book titled Scaling Up, which did very well. That's the name of his company, Scaling Up. He has a coaching network, which are Scaling Up coaches. But that was the word or phrase that he wanted to own. And his ICP is an entrepreneur who is out of the startup phase and is now venturing into the treacherous scale up phase, which is the hardest part, right? And so he owns a word or phrase. He knows very clearly who his ideal client profile is. And all of his thought leadership is singularly focused on reaching those people with that halo of a message around it.
That's interesting that you bring him up. And he didn't start with that, from what I remember. He started with Gazelles was his first company, and I don't think it had anything to do with animals.
No, his first book was titled Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and the name of the company was Gazelles. And for those that know the inside story, Gazelle is the equivalent of a scale-up business, right? And his theory was that, every country, every economy needs a healthy, robust number of gazelles, because that is where all job creation is largely centered. But to your point, unless you're an insider, you're not making that correlation, and you hear the word gazelle and you think, well, that's an animal. And so it was a name and a word that didn't serve him. And so it took a number of years. He said, the name of my company should be Scaling Up, which, oh, by the way, is the title of my best-selling book.
I think that's a great takeaway that I'm getting from this conversation, is choosing something to be an authority over that's recognizable to the general public, or at least in your marketplace. And it's got to be relatable. It can't be something overly creative. I think we often want to be creative and, come up with these unique things. And there's companies, that made it work. Google, for example, that's not a real word, but now it's ubiquitous in our society. But you have to do something amazing. There's probably a million other ideas that are weird words or phrases that nobody recognizes today. But it's having that, something distinct, I think, is essential.
Well, and if I look at our own company, Nathan, for many, many years, we were Advantage Media Group. Nice name, but it doesn't really tell you what we do, right? Advantage Media Group. Do they publish books? Do they publish magazines? Do they broadcast TV shows? Do they publish newsletters? Do they put on events? What is Advantage Media Group? A few years ago, we said, no, what our customers want is authority. And so we rebranded. We didn't want to throw out the equity that we had in the name Advantage, but we very purposefully kind of rebranded ourselves as Advantage, the Authority Company. Our domain is theauthoritycompany.com. And in fact, when most people talk to us that don't know us for long periods of time, they'll refer to us as the Authority Company. And we are the authority on authority. And, the book that I wrote some years ago, Authority Marketing, the newer book, The Authority Advantage. So it's all about, the word or phrase we want to own is authority. And, we intentionally create all of our educational content very intentionally around that.
That is a great segue. I really appreciate you coming on here. So, if this sparked an interest, somebody wants to become an authority, really advance themselves in their industry or their personal brand, how do they get in contact with you? And, what's kind of the process that you lead people through?
Yeah, great question, Nathan. So, not surprisingly, begin with the end in mind. And the first step that we take with anybody is something called an authority blueprint. And in that authority blueprint, we bring in our professional team of strategists and marketers and publishers, and we create a strategic plan. What is the word or phrase that you want to own? What is the why? Why is it that you want to own this term? What's the impact that you want to make? And then who is the audience that you want to reach? We start with that vision, and then we start building out a strategic plan with tactics on how you would do that from a thought leadership perspective. So the first step is always this authority blueprint, which is a really fun and engaging way for the entrepreneur, the CEO, the leader to really get clarity about, what it is they want and why is it that they want that. And then most importantly, if we were able to help them, well, we need a plan of exactly what we're going to do. And so rather than starting blind, we now have a plan that's baked out. So that's the first step, but really just having a phone call to learn more and explore how you could leverage authority to build your business, to make a bigger impact on the world. That's kind of where it all starts. For anybody listening or watching, send me an email, awitty, AWITTY, at theauthoritycompany.com. Reference that you listen to the show. I would be happy to route you to somebody on our team who could have that first call with you just to explore. And then, of course, theauthoritycompany.com is the best place to visit us. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So lots of places you can find us. And just Google Advantage the Authority Company, and you'll have to pack a lunch because there's a lot out there.
Well, I really appreciate the time, and I encourage anybody listening to this to take advantage of that, pun intended, of using that word. But it's a pleasure to have Adam on, and it's been great for us as we've gone through this strategy as Stimulus, building an authority around our brand, and it was a great process working with you guys on writing the book. And I think we all have to figure out how to stand out in front of all the AI content that's coming out there. We have to be on top of it to be found and find the right customers and help the right people that really we can each uniquely help in this world. So that's, I think, the end goal for all of us.
Nathan, what a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for being on, and appreciate everybody joining us today and coming to our 100th podcast of Stimulus Tech Talk.